The constructors' title no longer belongs to Red Bull, and a new champion has been crowned, and the 2024 Formula One season has finished in dramatic fashion. F1 Brake Check is here to recap the final race of the season and get you ready for the long, cold off season. If you're here for a unique perspective on F1, you like the absurd, or you just like to hear two yahoos talk about Formula One, you are in the right place. On today's podcast, you will hear us talk about the history of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. You'll hear Corey melt my brain with his trivia questions in our Stump the Pundit section, and we'll have a full recap of this week's action. So buckle up, grab a drink, let's Abu Dhabi do it. F1 Brake Check starts now.
Welcome. You are listening to F1 Brake Check, the epic podcast for all things Formula One, where we discuss technology, history, news, and perspective. With your hosts, Scott Vick and Corey Broom.
All right, we're back with F1 Brake Check. My name is Scott Vick. I am one of your intrepid hosts, and with me, as always, is my pundit for life, my brother in arms, my ride or die, Corey Broom. How are you doing this week, my friend?
Good. It's been a tiring week, but it's been good. Yeah. Yesterday was beautiful, but yeah, it's been good.
Yes.
Got to go out for a little bit. Friday we hung out for a little while. Sunday went over and met with some family, so it was all good, man. How about you?
Yeah. No, it's actually been good, but I'm ready for the holiday break. I'm ready to get away from everything and just kind of to chill for a little bit.
Yeah, nice.
Held at the stunning Yas Marina circuit on Yas Island in the heart of Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix has served as the season finale for most seasons since its debut in 2009. The event has become synonymous with drama and spectacular racing. The Yas Marina circuit is a masterpiece of modern circuit design created by renowned architect Herman Tilke, spanning a 5.281 kilometer or 3.281 miles with 21 turns. The track blends long straights with technical corners, making it a challenging venue for the drivers. One of its standout features is the pit lane exit, which runs through a tunnel beneath the track, a unique quirk in Formula One. The circuit is also famous for its nighttime setting. Cars race under the floodlights. Unlike the other night races, though, Abu Dhabi starts at dusk and transitions to the desert night, creating a visually stunning backdrop. Additionally, the track includes a section that passes under the Yas Hotel, an architectural marvel illuminated by a changing LED light display. The Yas Marina circuit is known for its two lengthy DRS zones, which in theory facilitate overtaking, particularly on the back straight. However, the track has often been criticized for producing processional races due to its tight corners and limited overtaking opportunities. This prompted modifications in 2021, including the removal of chicanes and a reshaped hairpin to promote better racing. The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix has seen its fair share of unforgettable moments over the years, with controversies and championship deciders making headlines. 2010, Vettel won his first championship. In one of the most dramatic moments in Abu Dhabi's history came in 2010 when Sebastian Vettel clinched his maiden world championship. Starting from pole, Vettel capitalized on a strategic blunder by Ferrari that saw Fernando Alonso get stuck behind Vitaly Petrov's Renault for much of the race. Vettel stormed to victory and became the youngest world champion in F1 history. The 2014 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix introduced the controversial double points rule for the season finale, which was later dropped. Lewis Hamilton won the race and the championship, but the event is remembered more for the failure of Nico Rosberg's car, which dashed his title hopes. The 2016 finale was a nail-biting showdown between Mercedes teammates Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. Hamilton deliberately slowed the pace in an attempt to back Rosberg into the chasing pack, but Rosberg held on to finish second and secure his only world championship. Much like his famous racing father Keke Rosberg, Nico promptly retired from F1. The 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix will go down as one of the most contentious races in F1 history. Max Verstappen claimed his first world championship after a late safety car allowed him to dive into the pit for fresh tires. Then, as the car circled the track behind the safety car, lobbying from the teams convinced the race director to allow lapped cars between Verstappen and Hamilton to go around and join at the back of the pack. This put Verstappen right on Hamilton's gearbox. The restart happened with one lap to go, and Verstappen's fresher rubber allowed him to pass Lewis Hamilton at the end of the long back straight, thanks in no small part to a controversial decision by race control. The aftermath reshaped F1's officiating procedures, with the safety car rules being reshaped as well. The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is more than just a race, it's a spectacle. With its lavish setting, A-list guests, and high-stakes drama, it has become a cornerstone of the F1 calendar. Whether admired for its pageantry or criticized for its controversy, Yas Marina has left an indelible mark on the sport's modern era. And that's our history on the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So, Corey, your thoughts on Abu Dhabi, the setting, and its place on the Formula One calendar?
I love the track. It's really really fun. Love the DRS zones. But it's funny. I always think of a comment that DC made when talking about the track, and something to the effect of, I won't get the quote right, but something to the effect of, you paid all this money to go to a track to where, as cars are exiting the pit lane, you don't see them. Why would you ever do that? I mean, it's cool.
Yeah, that's very true.
If you watch, the cars go under the tunnel and everything like that, that's cool. But you don't see that live. If you're spending all this money to go see it live, why would you do that? But other than that, I would say that was a big oversight or undersight, whatever you want to say. But other than that, man, it's fantastic. I love the track. It's so fun. And like you said in the history lesson, there's so many different places in history, in F1 history, that championships literally have been decided at this track. The constructors was decided at this track.
Yeah, that's one thing, is this place is definitely, partially because it has become, the season finale, which, for a number of years, just like, Suzuka in Japan, and especially back in the Adelaide days in Australia, when each of those races at one point for a number of years were the last races of the season, and oftentimes it was the same thing where the titles would be decided at those races. So I mean, it's like you had James Hunt, won his championship at Suzuka. You had Schumacher won his first championship at Adelaide, in the much controversial coming together with Damon Hill. But I mean, it's when a race becomes kind of the de facto season finale, then it oftentimes becomes also the de facto title decider, often for one or both of the titles. And so it's, that just adds to the, quote unquote mystique of Abu Dhabi, which I just absolutely love. And like if you're there live and you're on the front stretch, yes, it's weird that the fact that you don't see the cars exiting the pit, because the way that the pit X is done is it actually goes from one side of the track, cuts underneath through the tunnel, and then comes back up on the other side of the track and exits right at turn 2. So, if you're sitting on the front straightaway, you don't really see it. But if you're sitting in the grandstands on the outside of turn 2, then you do get to see them come flying out of the pits. I really like, so it's like the people in the cheaper seats get the better views.
Yeah.
And by cheaper seats, I say that firmly tongue in cheek. So,
well, it is cheaper. It is cheaper.
Yes.
That is not inaccurate.
Yes. And, having, I've never driven the track in real life, of course, because I've never been to the Arab Emirates, but having driven it on the simulator, it is a very cool and unique experience that I can only imagine how much cooler it is to actually get to do it in real life.
Right.
So it's just one of those things, one of those features about Abu Dhabi that I do just absolutely love. But the track itself too is also really, really fun to drive, at least in the simulator. And so and again, like I said, I can only imagine how much more fun that track really is in real life. And especially going down the back straightaway, you just feel like you're going forever. You come out of the turn onto the back straightaway, and you just feel like you're just going forever before you come down into the next, little left right twist right there. And it's so impressive. It's so much fun.
It really is. Yeah. I bet it would be to drive. That's one thing that, on Friday I saw your sim, and Man, I would love to have one of those. It is really a cool setup. I love the rig. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll be you know, the next thing is I want to take and I want to upgrade my my wheel setup, but that'll
Yeah.
come in time.
Nice. Yeah, right on.
Yeah. So, all right then. So this week the tech corner is going to take a week off. So because we have a lot of other information to get to this week. And so we're going to jump into what, as everyone knows is my favorite part of the week, Corey's trivia questions in Stump the Pundit. So Corey, what do you have for me this week?
So we'll talk about this more during the news section, but since there was a constructor that was that won the championship this year, I thought, hey, why not talk about McLaren? Not giving anything away
Okay.
here. Let's talk about McLaren and a little bit of their history as far as constructors titles go. So, in what year did McLaren win their first constructors?
It was 60. I just saw this stat today and was trying to remember it. It was either 63 or 67.
Kind of close. It's actually 1974.
Okay, so 74.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Right.
so 1974. Okay, so I was off by a little bit there.
All right. Question number 2. Which driver pairing contributed to their constructor championship in 1988?
1988.
Yeah.
That would have been Senna and Prost.
Yep. Yep. I kind of thought you'd get that one. All right. How many constructors championships has McLaren won in total?
9.
Yes. In which season did McLaren achieve the record-breaking 15 wins out of 16 races?
That would have been 1984 with the McLaren MP44.
88.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah, no, Lauda was 84. 88 was the MP44.
Okay. Who was a team principal at McLaren during their championship, their previous most recent constructors championship won in 1998?
That would have been Ron Dennis.
Yep. That's it. I would say you definitely know McLaren.
Yep. McLaren is one of those stories that is the story of McLaren to begin with is really a fascinating one that I think we will cover in a future podcast. We'll cover the history of McLaren and the team itself, and probably talk a little bit about its founder Bruce McLaren at that point.
Nice. Very cool.
All right, so we've got a lot to get into. So let's go into our weekend recap. So first off, move over, Red Bull. A new Constructors Championship has been crowned. And for the first time in 26 years, McLaren is on top of the F1 world. So this weekend, they had a pretty simple task. All they had to do was either Lando or Oscar had to win the race, and they were automatically guaranteed the Constructors Championship. And they did not disappoint. They did everything that they needed to do, and they did it to perfection. Lando took an absolutely phenomenal pole position, led from the start to Lando took and stormed to an absolutely perfect pole position and led wire to wire and never faltered one tiny little bit and brought home the win, which gave the constructors title to McLaren.
Yeah, I would like to say it was close, but man, he just dominated the entire race. I mean,
he really did.
As much as Carlos Sainz tried to get up, I mean, it just was not even close.
No,
he was a good, clean 4 seconds ahead at any time, and that's with him pushing, with Sainz pushing. So it was a dominating race for Lando.
Yeah, Sainz never really challenged Lando.
Not at all.
Lando was able to perfectly manage that gap and at the same time save so that he could save the tires and save the car to make sure that he brought it home in, and made sure that they finished out on top. On the flip side, we had kind of a bittersweet race for Piastri, because Piastri also put in an absolute storming lap during qualifying and missed out just by a scant couple thousandths of a second, and but it contributed to the front row lockout for McLaren. And then at the very beginning of the race, before they even get through, I think even the third corner, he got punted off the track by Max, who made a very opportunistic lunge that didn't work and sent Piastri off the track. But then Piastri went from dead last and fought his way all the way back up to 10th position and solidified that one extra point to add to McLaren's points total for the year.
Yeah, it was a great race by him, but yeah, not only did he get booted off, like you said, he had that penalty and just it just looked like a horrible race for Piastri. But man, to his credit, he got back, he clawed his way back into points. When I mean, that much time was taken out, and he still made a huge impact. I mean, he still got points.
Yes, exactly. The
Just
fact
amazing.
that the fact that he dropped to the very back of the pack, and then he had it coming together with I forget, remind me, who did he come together with? I think it was one of the Alpines. I think it was Ocon's Alpine that he came together with. So he gets a 10-second penalty on top of everything else. So at the first pit stop, he has to sit there in the pits, when the mechanics can't touch the car. And all of a sudden you go from losing 22 seconds in the pit to losing 35 seconds in the pit. It could have just all completely come apart for Piastri. And he didn't give up. And as we have, lamented, multiple times this season, this kid, we keep forgetting about just how young he is and how short of a time he's been in F1. And the fact that he still continues to deliver these kind of performances is just nothing short of awe-inspiring, in my opinion.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, I mean, he's just the patience that he has, and because a lot of times you would just get impatient and you would start stumbling and get nervous, what have you. But he looks like the consummate professional, all the way through.
Oh yeah,
really impressive to watch. Yeah.
So next year is going to be, a lot of fun to watch. I'm waiting for the fireworks.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how he and Lando get along next season.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll be, a lot of, those kind of relationships where I think at the beginning of the season, everything will be fine. It's only once they're fighting tooth and nail inside of their own team for the championship that's when sometimes you can see those relationships just kind of fall apart, I mean, we've seen it before, it was, like with, Senna and Prost, with Mansell and Prost. I'm kind of sensing a theme going here. But you saw the same thing happen with, Hamilton and Rosberg, that when they first started out, they were teammates in going all the way back to their karting days. But the year that Nico won in the championship, it got to the point where it was so contentious between Hamilton and Rosberg that they actually, by the end of the season, they weren't speaking at all. They weren't even sharing data, across the garage.
Terrible.
And after the season ended, Rosberg and Hamilton didn't actually even speak for a number of years before they started to mend those bridges. And even to this day, they're still, if you saw the Sky Sports interviews after the race, when Rosberg was talking to Lewis, it was still a little chilly. They still do not, it's not quite as acrimonious as it used to be, but it's still nowhere close to, they're not like, texting each other on, on a regular basis or anything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Piastri takes, and like I said, he takes and joins some very, very exclusive company. It's like there's only been a handful of drivers that have managed to do it, and it's only been within like the last 20 years that that's ever happened. Because back when the cars used to be not nearly as reliable as they are now, it was unheard of for a driver to finish every lap of every race in a season. It wasn't until I think it was either 2003 or 2004 that Michael Schumacher became the very first driver to ever do that. And since then, there's only been a couple since then, and Piastri joins that very elite company.
Nice. Good for him.
And especially, and again, at such a young age to do it is just, and in only his second full season in Formula One, he managed to do it. So it's incredible.
Yeah, no kidding.
With McLaren being crowned the champion, Ferrari finishes second. They got so tantalizingly close. Leclerc had a absolutely brilliant qualifying, but because of they had to change the battery, which automatically gave Leclerc a 10-place grid penalty, and then they had to replace another component on the car, which I forget what they had to replace, but they had to replace something else on the car. So that basically pushed Leclerc all the way to the back of the grid, and then Leclerc went on an absolute tear.
Yeah.
Within the first lap, he had gone from starting in let's see, I forget, where did he start? He started 19th, and he started the race in 19th place, and by the end of the first lap, he was already running 8th.
Right.
That was just nothing short of amazing. It was an incredibly inspired drive by Charles Leclerc to bring the car home for the third step on the podium. Yep. And it was just a phenomenal drive, and gathered those points that if Lando had with
anything like
Oscar's,
that,
with Oscar's troubles, and if Lando had faltered even the slightest, Charles and Carlos would have been right there, and we could be having a very, very different conversation today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's too bad, it was just the level of effort that they had. If Leclerc would have not had that grid penalty back down to where he was, who knows, maybe he could have challenged Lando a bit more. But with as talented a driver as Sainz is, I just don't know how feasible that was, or how feasible that would be. Like you said, Lando just drove a perfect drive. He had a perfect race, and you can't wish for something that obviously didn't happen. So,
but like I told you, like I said, that I told you that it was going to come down to the wire, and it pretty much did. It was, right down to the wire, the Constructors Championship fight. Yeah. But, one of the things, though, that made this year, because there's been, in the past, if you go back, and we'll talk more about this, at a later date when we talk about the history of McLaren and things like that. But you got back in the Ron Dennis days, McLaren and Ferrari were fighting every year, tooth and nail, for the Constructors Championship. And there was a number of years where it got really, really contentious, where, I mean, there was, incidents of, spying and documents theft, and, all kinds of intrigue and things like that were going on between the two teams, and to see just how different McLaren is now under Zach Brown, and how much different Ferrari is under Mr. Vasseur. It's so different, at least right now. And again, this is one of those things where it's like right now everybody's, buddy, but next year when they're really fighting for the championship, let's see if it still remains that way. But exactly. I really like to see this, though. I am really, really liking this, where if Freddie and and the Ferrari team aren't winning and McLaren is, he's super happy for them. And vice versa, that, if if McLaren isn't winning and Ferrari does, Zach and the drivers and everything
Yeah.
are all like super happy for him. They're like photobombing
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other teams,
Love it.
group pictures and stuff like that. They're coming in and spraying champagne, on the other team,
Yeah.
and I'm loving this part of that dynamic between the two teams. Is you
Yeah.
can tell that there is so much. It was like during the Sky Sports telecast, at the end of the race, it's like you had all of the McLaren mechanics and all of the Ferrari mechanics sitting there hugging each other, saying great job. Just the sportsmanship between the two teams is just, it's something that 26 years ago when McLaren won their last championship, it was a full-on dogfight with Ferrari that year
Yeah.
for the constructors championship. And you never would have seen anything like that. It's like the Ferrari mechanics and the McLaren mechanics would have just as soon punched each other as looked at each other. And to see that how much it has changed
Right.
is just it makes this old time fan's heart actually kind of sing a little bit.
Awesome.
So with the end of the race, though, even though he did try his best to push Lando, Sainz ends up coming home second on the day. And it was a very kind of emotional farewell for Sainz to Ferrari. The radio transmission at the end of the race was just, it was really, really heartwarming, in my opinion. Just the fact that, Sainz was so thankful to the team, so thankful for getting to be a part of that team for the last 4 years, and the love from the team was also just really was just a really, really cool thing to listen in on when they were during the radio transmissions.
Yeah. Yeah. And his final farewell was just, it's great to see that he has this much investment into the team. Again, it takes a certain kind of professional knowing that you just got canned and still driving your best. A lot of people, after they got sacked, they would just say, I don't care, just basically a write-off. But he didn't do that at all. And it was really impressive to see how much investment he had. And who knows, Fred Vasseur has left the door open. So
Oh yeah.
if and when if the Lewis thing doesn't work out, or Lewis decides to retire next year, whatever, I mean, that door seems like at least it's at least cracked, but
Yes.
then again, looking at the test trials, today and yesterday, he was up there in Williams. He was number 2, number 3, in the testing. So, it'll be interesting to see what he can do in that car next year, against
Oh yeah.
one, especially.
For one thing, he's very fast.
Yeah.
So he's gonna do things with that Williams that even, Albon, I don't think could do. Second of all, he is probably, if he's not the best, he's one of the best developmental drivers on the grid. The things that I've heard about his ability to, provide feedback to the team, there's a lot of people that say that, he provides feedback to the team that, even leaves the engineers shaking their heads because of his understanding of the car and what the car needs in order to make it go fast. So that's going to, give Williams something that I don't think that they've had for quite a while.
Yeah.
They something that they probably haven't had since, since Bottas was there,
Yeah.
or it's something that they've been missing for the last 2 years when, after Russell left. So I think that that's going to be a big thing for, Williams as well, that Sainz is going to bring to that team. So and just, the level of professionalism that, Sainz has shown, like you said, he could have very well have just said, F
Yeah.
it, and, kind of slagged off for the rest of the year, and, and kind of,
Especially
but he
after he
did
got his
not.
contract,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially after he finally signed with Williams, and they made the announcement, he very could have easily have just said, F it, I'm just going to kind of half-ass the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And, no, he fought tooth and nail until the very last lap, which is something we talked about, a number of podcasts ago. but he still continued to show that same level of commitment and same level of you know passion and fight all the way until the very last lap of the season.
Yeah.
So I just can't say enough good things about Carlos Sainz, and I really really hope for the best once he gets to Williams, because the other thing too though is that is not going to crash nearly as much, so he's going to save the team a lot of money in that respect.
No doubt about that. Although maybe you've just jinxed him.
God, I hope not. I hope not. And if I did, I am so sorry, Carlos. I apologize. I'm going to go out on a limb right now, though, and say, no, I don't think that that's going to be the
No,
case.
not at all. So on to Red Bull.
Yeah, so let's talk about Red Bull. So their 3-year reign as the constructors champion has ended. They end up finishing third on the season behind McLaren and Ferrari, and their race was not really up to their standard. Now, admittedly, you know, Max having already secured the championship and knowing that they had no way of improving their position, you got to give it to Red Bull that they, at least in Max's case, they still performed as best as they could considering the circumstances. So as we already talked about before, Max and Piastri came together on the opening lap. Max got a 10-second penalty for the collision with Piastri, which going back and looking at it, it really was way too the move on Max's part was way too optimistic, I guess is the right word to look at it.
Yeah.
That there was no way he was going to make that stick, especially against a competitor like Piastri. And,
Right.
And his view of it saying that, oh, I was all the way up inside. And it's like, go back and look at it. And it's like, no, you weren't,
Yeah.
Max. You were clearly in the wrong. You deserve that penalty. But, he drops back. He takes the penalty at the first
Yep.
round of pit stops, and he still manages to fight back to sixth place, which was, a pretty good effort on
Yeah.
Max's part.
But again, he didn't really need the points. He could have gotten a DNF, and his season was already finished. But yeah, he fought back. He had a pretty good race considering that 10-second penalty did not come at the most opportune time for him. So he did a great job with what he had.
Yeah, he did. But on the flip side, you had poor Checo, and Checo ends up being the first DNF of the race. He ends up, basically, ruining the car, and he didn't qualify well, and then he ends up, as the first DNF of the race. So, and with that, another weekend, another DNF, the second DNF in a row. Um, Rumor has it that it's all but done that Sergio Perez is out for next year at
He
Red
needs to
Bull.
be. We've been saying it for months now, but I mean, he's just not a factor. It's either you keep him and just understand that you will not get a constructors championship with him at the wheel. You just won't. And if that's your if that's your gig, hey, fine. But if you want to win championships, you can't have him in the seat. He's just not going to be there.
I think that the writing is on the wall that Perez is gone. I don't see, if any, he might have that seat at Racing Bulls next year. He might be doing the swap with one of the drivers over there,
Yeah.
but Perez will not be in. I'm going to go out on a limb right now, and I'm going to say Perez will not be in a Red Bull next year.
No. Again, it all depends on what Red Bull wants, right? I just don't see it though.
No. I think with this last DNF, that was the nail in the coffin.
I agree.
Okay, so let's take and talk about Mercedes. So Mercedes had another very, very strong performance this weekend. Lewis Hamilton did not have a good qualifying. The team even admitted that we screwed it up, and he exits in Q1, but then he takes and has an absolute flyer of a race. And he takes and he, just like Leclerc, he fights his way all the way from the back of the grid. Although admittedly he didn't have to come from as far back as Charles Leclerc did, but he qualified 16th, and he manages to charge all the way back up to fourth place. And he was really trying to hunt down Charles, hoping to get a podium
Yeah.
for his last time,
Yep.
his last
Oh
drive
yeah.
with Mercedes. He
Right.
was
Right.
trying so hard.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, he had a fantastic drive as well. He passed Russell in just probably one of the greatest passes of
Oh
the
yeah.
year. Oh,
Oh
it's
yeah.
such a beautiful pass the way he did that. Just needled it right through. Just he's just a phenomenal driver. It's going to be really exciting to see him next year in a Ferrari, see what he can do. Him and
Yep.
Fred.
But Russell also looked really good all
Yeah, no
weekend
doubt about it.
long.
Yeah.
And it's just this, I mean, the turnaround at Mercedes, though, is this, it kind of leads me to the question of, is this, you know, a harbinger of things to come, and the way that is Mercedes going to look much more competitive next
Yeah.
year? And I really think that that is going to be the case. I think that they're going to be much more competitive next year, and they're going to be right there in the mix for the fight for the constructors championship next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, right? Because they have Antonelli coming on board, so it's going to be his first season. So constructors, maybe you know more about Antonelli than I do, but having a brand new driver in a top team, that's going to be tough. And not saying that impossible, but again, Antonelli a lot better than I do, so your
Yeah.
judgment on his ability to cope with the demands of a top tier team.
Yep. And that is going to be the wild card. Is
Yeah.
I definitely think that the performance from the car and from the team will be there, as far as it's going to be the points that, does if Antonelli is able to minimize mistakes and get, I don't expect him to be, fighting for wins, right out of the gate. I don't expect him to be, challenging Russell a lot right out of the gate. But as the season goes on, depending upon, how his, if he's able to minimize the mistakes at the beginning of the year, and he's able to start to build his confidence, because as we've talked about before, hundreds of times on this podcast, is that a lot of a driver's ability is his confidence in his ability and in the abilities of the car. And
Mhm.
if he's able to start building up that mental fortitude and that confidence, in himself and in the team towards the back half of the season, I do see him being, fairly competitive. And I think that but that's the one thing, is it's like I know enough about Antonelli's ability in the lower tiers,
Yeah.
but how is he going to react when the bright lights of the big stage are on him?
Exactly. Right.
Because we've seen a number of other drivers
Yep.
who coming up through the ranks, they looked amazing. They looked like, prime example, Kevin Magnussen. His father, Jan Magnussen, when he first came into Formula One, he was on the podium in his very first race. And everybody said, this kid's faster than Schumacher. He's going to challenge Schumacher. And he ended up flaming out very quickly.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
yes. And so, that's one of a prime example of, he coming up through the ranks, through the lower tiers. The kid was, he was blindingly fast.
Hmm.
But once he got to, came on at McLaren, and he was under that big spotlight, he flamed out pretty quickly.
Wow. And then you have
So
others like Piastri that it's like they've been there for 20 years, So it'll be
exactly.
interesting to see how he goes.
Yes, it will be. And, but the other thing too, though, is that unlike when, in the past, when we've seen, hot shoes come in and, who could pedal the car pretty fast and everything, but then because of the, media and everything, they flamed out. A lot of these drivers and stuff now, they get all kinds of media training and things like that. And I guarantee you that Mercedes will be working with him as much on his media presence and how to handle himself as they will be learning about the car and things like that. So,
Yeah.
so we'll see.
Yeah.
So now one of the things that it was a very emotional day for Mercedes and for Lewis Hamilton, because it was his final race before he moves off to Ferrari next year. And the radio transmission at the end of the race, I thought was just like Carlos Sainz and it being very emotional, and both the driver and the team showing a lot of love for each other. We had the same thing with Lewis Hamilton, and we had, other, people like, Zach Brown coming up and giving Lewis a huge hug. But I mean, we even had George, who, walked all the way from the front of the grid all the way back to Hamilton's car before the race started to give Hamilton a hug, to show him that
Yeah,
respect
right.
of, just what he has meant to him personally and to the Mercedes team. And just the love up and down the grid, for Hamilton was just amazing on.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it, he's been a champion. He's, seven-time champion now. He's looking for his eighth, and he just has the respect of the entire grid. So it was really, really encouraging to see that.
Yep. And did you happen to see the package that Sky Sports did during the
Didn't see.
pre-race show?
No,
Oh, you've got to go back and watch it. You
yeah,
got to go find it on YouTube, because it was absolutely probably one of the best segments that they've had all year. So one of the things that Mercedes did as kind of their farewell to Lewis is they pulled out three of his championship winning cars and took them to Silverstone, and he got the chance to drive all three cars at Silverstone. And it and Martin Brundle got to jump into one of his cars and drive the track with Lewis. And it was just an incredible day. And you could tell just by watching it, first of all, how moved Martin was, by
yeah,
the way, the love that the team was showing him. But you could also tell just how moved Lewis was by
right.
getting, by the team doing that for him, and, making sure that he got, a proper send off, before they went to the final race. And it was just, like I said, you go back and find it. It was just one of the best
Okay, yeah,
pieces I think that Sky Sports has done all season long.
awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at it.
Yep. All right, so let's get on to Haas then. So Haas had like you said, a couple weeks ago, when you said that they were no longer your surprise team when we were doing the preview, they had another really, really good weekend.
Yep.
Hulk had an amazing qualifying. Unfortunately, he got a penalty for having to take and change a component on the car, which dropped him back on the starting grid, but he still was able to fight and come bring the car
Yep.
home in eighth place,
Yep.
so to gather some more all important points for Haas, and just had a really, really good weekend.
Yeah, it was awesome. His last race, he got points. I thought I read somewhere that he was the top driver as far as points go in a single season for Haas, or all
Hmm.
maybe, yeah. So it was
Yes.
it was really good to see that, and it was just such a great ending to his Haas career. Now it's gonna be really exciting next year for him. I
Oh
cannot
yeah.
wait to see him in that car.
Yes. I cannot wait to see him in the Sauber next year. I'm sorry, in the Audi next
Audi,
year.
yes, yes.
Yeah, but unfortunately, for, K-Mag, it was kind of a disappointing final race for Haas, and at least for right now, his final race in Formula One. Now, it's not to say that he may not be back, because we've already seen him exit Formula One once, and kind of like the line from The Godfather 3, I try to get away and they keep pulling me back in.
That's
But
funny,
we
man.
did get the news that, K-Mag would be going to BMW, going back to
Yeah,
BMW, and would be working with BMW in the World Endurance Championship, driving their hypercar next year. So it'll be fun to get to watch him, flying around, in a competitive piece of
yeah,
machinery, in a different format. So it'll be fun to
yeah.
get, it's far from being the end of K-Mag's career as a
Oh
racing
yeah,
driver.
yeah. He's too
So
good. Maybe
yeah, so.
there's just not a spot for him right now in F1, and maybe this is the end of his F1 career. But as far as racing goes, he's way too good of a driver to be gone out of racing completely. So
Yeah, no,
as long as he
absolutely.
didn't go to NASCAR.
Yeah, no, there was no way that was happening.
Totally joking, but yeah.
All right. So, with that though, another team that has, towards the later part of the season started to really surprise us. Alpine ends up finishing sixth in the constructors when at the beginning of the season, you and I both, if you had told me that they were
Yep.
going to finish any higher than eighth in the constructors championship, and I really
Ninth.
thought they were going to come in dead last. I
I
thought they
did
were going to
too.
come in ninth or
Yeah.
10th.
Yep.
To
Same.
tell me that they were going to come in sixth, I would have called you a bald-faced liar, but
Yeah.
amazingly enough, they scored,
I know.
especially with the strength of the last couple races, they were able to take a huge chunk out of Haas's lead and ended up coming home in sixth in the constructors championship. So
Yeah.
kudos on
Oh
Alpine.
yeah. No doubt about it.
So, but we do have to also mention Pierre Gasly, who drove a really solid race and ended up seventh on the day to give them a few extra points that it kind of helped push them above Haas in the constructors championship standing. But one of the other things, another record that was set by Gasly this weekend, that much like Piastri's ability to finish every single lap, Pierre Gasly cost Alpine $0 as far as from any damage to the car, which is just I have a hard time wrapping my head
No
around that. The
kidding.
fact that he didn't cost them a penny this year in repair
Right.
costs.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I was thinking while you were talking how, next year to see him in a fairly adequate car, hopefully, and just what he can do with the car because man,
Yeah.
his driving this season has really just dramatically improved. He's almost like a Yuki Tsunoda, in my opinion, as far
Hmm.
as being able to improve his driving ability that fast. Just over a span of a season, he was good last year, but this year I would say he was fairly remarkable.
Yeah, no, I would say that, he definitely did things with, even when the car was as bad as it was, he, still kept fighting, still
Yeah,
kept providing, really, really good feedback to the team, and you can definitely see, the reason why Alpine was so keen to hang on to him for the next couple seasons.
yeah, yeah, no doubt about it.
All right, so let's take them and talk about Racing Bulls then. So they had a mediocre weekend at best. Yuki just couldn't quite get the handle on the car this weekend, which was
Right.
really uncharacteristic for
Yep.
Yuki. But I mean, even with all the troubles that they had during practice and everything with the car, he missed Q3, but he only missed it by a very small, I'm trying to look at the times here now. In qualifying, he missed out on Q3 by literally less than a tenth of a second. So, all
Crazy.
things considered, for as tough a weekend, and then he ends up, finishing 12th on the day. So not a great day for Yuki,
Yeah.
but it still showed the fight that Yuki and the difference in the mindset that Yuki has had this year, to
Right.
take and go to show just, how much hard he was fighting. And even when the car wasn't good, he was still doing his absolute
Yep.
best that he possibly could. Really, I think that, he was looking at this weekend as much of a
Oh yeah.
audition for Red Bull
Yep.
as any, like he has, all year long, that
No
he
doubt about it.
still had that audition mindset and was working just as absolutely
Mhm.
hard as he possibly could.
Oh yeah, 100%. He sees that
Yep.
seat, and who knows? Maybe Red Bull doesn't give him a shot, or maybe they do. But it would. He's definitely vying for that spot because
Oh yeah.
I mean
And if Red Bull isn't willing to, then hopefully one of the
somebody
other
else. Yeah.
teams, if they have an opening suddenly come up,
Yep.
then he deserves a look.
No doubt
Um,
about
I,
it. Yeah.
yeah, I went back and I looked at it uh at his qualifying performance this year as opposed to, his teammates, first with Ricardo and then
Mhm.
with Lawson. And in the 15 races that Yuki and Ricardo were teammates, he out qualified, or no, I'm sorry. Um, it was more than 15. It was in 18 races. In the 18 races that Yuki and Ricardo were teammates, he out qualified Ricardo 13-5. He has outqualified Lawson every single race that they've been teammates this season. That just goes to show the maturation of
Yeah,
Yuki and how much he really deserves a spot at Red Bull. And
I
I'm going to lobby long and hard on this podcast and anyone who will listen to me that if Checo's out, Yuki should be the only one that they should be looking at. I know Lawson is the one who's, Helmet Marco and a couple other people are really high on, but the fact of the matter is if you look at the straight up
yeah,
competition between Yuki and Lawson, Yuki had the measure of him every single race
yep,
this season. And even when you go back to even Lawson's amazing performances last year, Yuki was still out qualifying him on a regular
yeah.
basis. So, which just tells me that Yuki's the better choice.
I wholeheartedly agree. In fact, it was trending on Twitter or it was trending on X for a while. Yuki to Red Bull. So
Yeah.
lots of people want to see him take that seat.
Yep.
We all
As do
know
I.
Perez is out. Everybody
Yep.
knows Perez is out. There is no
That's
doubt.
true. And as like I made earlier in the podcast, I'm making that prediction that Perez is out. Now it's just a matter of who's taking that spot. And I think that Yuki absolutely deserves that spot. He has done everything that he needs to do to make sure that he gets a fair look.
Yep. Agreed.
Now, unfortunately, Liam Lawson had a fairly good race going, and then the car just ends up a smoking pile with 3 laps to go, and he ends up DNFing for the day, which I think was he still wasn't in touch with Yuki at any point, but he was having a fairly good race, until the car let go on him. But, probably not the way he wanted to end the race or anything. But all right, so let's take and talk about the rest of the field. We have, with Aston Martin, Williams, and Sauber. Aston Martin had an okay day. Fernando gets, a couple of well-needed points. Aston Martin ends up, as we predicted at the beginning of as they've been there pretty much all season long, that they've been the top of the rest of the teams after the top four. So he got a couple more points. Lance had not a great race, but he didn't do anything really boneheaded that I saw this weekend. So he drove a solid race, but not a very fast race. So my hope is that next year with a little more tutelage under Alonso, that maybe next year things start to turn around and he starts making a few less of those boneheaded mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would be good to see him to actually be able to make something out of because he's a talented driver. It'd be really good to see him actually start making some places and actually turning at least his career around a bit, so he's not the always the last. He's beaten Alonso a few times, but not very many, and it would be really good to see him at least being a little bit more competitive with Alonso.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but with Newey coming on board in the spring and everything, I'm expecting big things out of Aston Martin for next year.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely.
Yep. All right. So Williams, though, on the flip side, you had Colapinto has a crash, ends up out of the race. Not pretty piss poor weekend. Alex Albon did not look good most of the weekend, and I think a lot of that just could be chalked up to like we talked about last week, at Qatar. Right now, the Williams is basically being held together by chewing gum and baling wire. As the old saying goes, so it's like they were talking about during the pre-show that the entire rear suspension, they had to get help from Mercedes and get some parts from Mercedes just in order to be able to put a rear suspension on the cars for this weekend. So that's just how bad the whole Williams team was hurting this weekend, as far as the car's performance and things like that. So to see, Albon actually even, finish the race, albeit a lap down, I think is pretty much a testament of the fight in Williams and the fight in Albon this weekend. Knowing that, they didn't have a whole lot to fight for, but yet they still continue to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be really I can't wait for next year to see what Williams can do, because they, in my mind at least, they had to promise signs something. So I'm hoping, reading the tea leaves, so to speak, I'm hoping to see that, they showed him some future plans, or they had something up their sleeve, something that really attracted him to Williams, because he signed on with them fairly early. So I'm hoping to see Williams really to be, higher up in the grid than they were obviously this year. So
Oh, and I totally think that that is exactly what is going to happen. Is you're going to see a much improved Williams next year. Just simply on the fact that, I don't think you're going to see as many crashes. So they're not going to be
yeah,
constantly fighting,
right.
having to repair the car,
Yeah,
with limited resources and things like that. And I'm like you, I definitely think that the infrastructure and the things that Williams has put into the place over the last couple of seasons, I think that that's, Signs said that that's what drew him to come back to Williams, is that now that they've got this new infrastructure and this new management structure and everything else, that's what drew him back to it. And I think that that's what's going to elevate Williams for next season.
yeah, yeah. I hope so, man.
Yeah.
Again, like you said, at least they'll have less crashes.
Yes, absolutely. And better development.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And poor Sauber bringing up the rear end
Oh
of the
yeah,
field with their 4 points, which, were 4 points that weren't scored until the last race, the penultimate race of the season. It was just a miserable season for Sauber with a miserable car, and I'm sure that they're ready to just close that book, pack it up, and head back to Switzerland, and just forget that this season even happened. So
yeah.
with that, we'll talk just very briefly, because we talked about the farewell of Sainz leaving Ferrari, of Lewis leaving Mercedes, and we saw the farewell, because this was, at least for right now, the last F1 races for both, for Valtteri Bottas, for Joe Granu, and for Kevin Magnussen. At least for now, there's who's to say that they may not be back at some point. But kind of a bittersweet day for all three of them, because all three had a pretty, you know, inglorious days for for their final farewell.
Yeah.
And I hope them nothing but the best. And hopefully, if they go to other racing series, or wherever they land, I wish them nothing but the best.
Same here. Yeah, especially Botas.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
K Mag
Now
too. I mean, all three of them are fantastic, and I really hope the best for them.
I
Botas,
want you to.
I'm secretly hoping to see him somewhere other than as a reserve for Mercedes.
And last but not least, like we said, we have Sainz is moving on to Williams. We have Ocon, who was dropped for the last race, who is moving on to Haas for next season. We have Hamilton going to Ferrari. And, like we talked about, during the recap, could we possibly see Yuki moving on to Red Bull? So some big changes, coming for next season. So I'm super excited. I heard, somebody said the other day, it's only 57 more days until the season, preseason testing. So bring it on. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you think it's time to wrap it up?
Think so.
Okay, so with that, the desert lights have switched off and the off season has begun. Come back next week when Corey and I will discuss the end of season testing from the Yas Marina circuit. We'll discuss the latest news, and we'll review the 2024 season and present our end of year grades for each team. We'll also have an all new tech corner and more pundit stumping trivia. So until next time, he's Corey, I'm Scott. We're the pundits of F1 Brake Check. Let's go!
Thank you for listening to F1 Brake Check. If you have enjoyed what you heard, don't miss a single episode by hitting that subscribe button in your favorite podcatcher, or you can watch the video version on YouTube. Help us grow by sharing us with your friends and fellow F1 fans. You can contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok and X at F1 Brake Check. Our website is f1brakecheck.com, where you will find links to all our content. We value your passion and your feedback, so please take a moment to review our podcast. Your reviews help us grow and improve, and it means the world to us. Share your thoughts, rate us, and let us know how we can make the show experience even better. F1 Brake Check is a production of Brake Check Media. For your hosts Scott Vick and Corey Broom, until next time, keep yourself inside track limits, and try not to pitch it in the kitty litter.